I found something in our apartment that I wasn't supposed to see, and it changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Denver in spring has this way of making everything feel fresh and new. The mountains still have snow on top, the air smells clean, and people walk around with this renewed energy. That's exactly how I felt that March morning as I headed to my design studio downtown. I'm Jim, and I've spent the last 10 years building my career as lead designer for a commercial architecture firm. My wife Catherine and I had what I thought was a solid marriage. She worked long hours as a pediatrician at Denver Health, and I respected her dedication to helping kids. We'd met at a charity auction 11 years ago. She was bidding on a vacation package to Costa Rica. I was there representing my firm, which had donated architectural renderings for the event. We started talking during the cocktail hour, and I was immediately drawn to her intelligence and passion for her work. She had this way of lighting up when she talked about her patients, about making a difference in children's lives. A year later, we got married in a small ceremony in the Rockies, surrounded by 30 of our closest friends and family. No kids yet. We'd always said we were waiting for the right time, though lately that conversation had become less frequent. The truth was, we were both so consumed by our careers that the idea of children kept getting pushed further into some undefined future. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs were there long before that April evening. We'd fallen into a rhythm that felt comfortable, but was actually just routine. We were two professionals sharing an apartment, splitting bills, occasionally having dinner together when our schedules aligned. The passion had dimmed so gradually that neither of us noticed when it disappeared entirely. The first sign came on a Tuesday night in early April. Catherine's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the screen lit up with a message preview. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place." The contact name was just an initial, H. I stood there, staring at those words, my coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. The message was innocent enough on the surface, but something about it felt wrong. The casualness, the familiarity, the fact that it was saved under just an initial. When Catherine came out, her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing the blue robe I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago, I almost asked her about it. Almost. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe fear. Maybe the desperate hope that I was overreacting. Instead, I smiled and told her I'd made her favorite breakfast for tomorrow. She kissed my cheek absently, already scrolling through her work emails, and the moment passed. But I couldn't let it go. That night, lying in bed next to her, listening to her breathing even out as she fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was being paranoid. Catherine had never given me reason to doubt her. She was dedicated, loyal, almost obsessively organized. Infidelity seemed completely out of character. The late-night calls started after that, or maybe they'd always been there, and I'd just started noticing. Catherine would step out onto our apartment balcony, speaking in hushed tones, her silhouette visible through the glass door. When I asked who called, she'd say it was work, a patient's parent with concerns, a colleague with questions about a case. Plausible enough. She was a pediatrician, after all. Emergency calls weren't unusual. Parents panicked at night, colleagues consulted on difficult cases. I had no reason to doubt her. But then I noticed she'd started going to evening workshops. Medical seminars, she said. Professional development opportunities. I supported her career ambitions completely, so I never questioned it. Catherine was always taking courses, attending conferences, staying current with pediatric medicine. It was part of what made her so good at her job. Until one evening in late April, when she mentioned she'd learned a new technique for examining infant heart murmurs at a workshop that didn't match anything I could find in medical journals or conference schedules. I'd searched, casually at first, then more desperately. The workshop she'd described didn't exist. I'm not proud of what I did next. One night after Catherine fell asleep, around 2 in the morning when I was certain she was deeply under, I carefully took her phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I tried her passcode, our anniversary date, 0614. It didn't work. She'd changed it. That's when the knot in my stomach became a rock, heavy and cold. People don't change their passwords without reason. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. My junior designer Tom knocked on my office door 3 times before I heard him. "Jim, the Henderson project renderings? They need your approval by end of day." I waved him off, mumbled something about reviewing them later, and went back to staring at my computer screen without really seeing it. The blueprints blurred together, meaningless lines on a meaningless grid. I needed proof. Real proof. Not just suspicions and late-night calls that could be explained away, not just a changed password that could be chalked up to security concerns. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. That's when I remembered something about Catherine that had always been both endearing and slightly obsessive. She kept meticulous records of everything. It was part of her personality, probably what made her such a good doctor. She had a home office where she sometimes did administrative work, updating patient files, reviewing cases on her encrypted laptop. She kept a personal calendar there too, a physical one with a floral cover that her sister had given her, where she tracked appointments that didn't go into her digital work schedule. The following Saturday, Catherine said she was going to a colleague's house to discuss a research paper on pediatric respiratory infections. She kissed my cheek and left around 2 in the afternoon, telling me she'd be back by dinner. I waited 15 minutes, watching from our window as her car disappeared down the street, then went to her office. The calendar sat on her desk, innocent-looking with its floral cover and silk ribbon bookmark. My heart was pounding as I opened it to April. There they were, notations in her familiar handwriting, small and precise. Workshop 7 p.m. appeared multiple times throughout the month, but each entry had a small asterisk next to it. I flipped to the back pages where she kept notes and reference information. Next to corresponding asterisks, PB Pool, and a name that made my blood run cold, Hank. I sat down heavily in her chair, the leather creaking under my weight. PB Pool. I turned the abbreviation over in my mind. There was only one place in our neighborhood that fit, the pool bar at the Riverside Recreation Center, about 20 minutes from our apartment. It had a casual pool hall attached to it where people hung out in the evenings, playing billiards, drinking beer, pretending to be somewhere other than their real lives. But I needed more. I needed to understand how this started, how deep it went, whether I was looking at the end of my marriage. Catherine was meticulous about her work files too. She sometimes brought home encrypted backup drives with patient information, all properly secured and HIPAA compliant, of course. But she also had a personal drive where she kept non-work items. Photos from vacations, personal documents, tax returns, and apparently, things she thought were private. I found the drive in her desk drawer, underneath a stack of medical journals. It wasn't encrypted, why would it be? It was her personal space in our home. She trusted me. The irony wasn't lost on me as I plugged it into her computer, my hand trembling so badly I could barely manage the USB port. There were folders of photos. Trips we'd taken together, Napa Valley, New York, that weekend in Santa Fe. Holiday celebrations with both our families. Our wedding, with Catherine in her simple, elegant dress, both of us so young and hopeful. And then a folder simply labeled KC. My cursor hovered over it. Some part of me knew that once I opened it, there would be no going back. This was the moment. I could close the computer, put everything back, choose willful ignorance. I clicked it. They weren't explicit photos, thank God. But they told a story more devastating than any explicit image could have. Catherine and a man I didn't recognize, athletic build, sandy hair, easy smile, the kind of casual confidence I'd never possessed, at what looked like a hotel conference room or workshop venue. The metadata showed the date, February 14th, Valentine's Day. While I'd been at the office finishing a rush project for a demanding client, working through the evening to meet a deadline, she'd been at something she'd called a mandatory medical seminar. There were more photos. The two of them at the pool bar, casual and relaxed. Playing pool together, her laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back in genuine joy. His hand on the small of her back in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. Her looking at him the way she used to look at me in our early days, before careers and routines and the daily grind had worn us down. I dug deeper into the files, driven by some masochistic need to know everything. There were document files too. I opened one titled Notes. It was a journal of sorts, documenting their meetings. It had started 4 months ago at an actual workshop. She hadn't completely lied about that part. It was a medical illustration masterclass that brought together healthcare professionals and medical artists. Apparently, this Hank was a pharmaceutical sales representative who attended to better understand medical imagery for his presentations. Catherine had written about how they'd started talking during a coffee break, how he'd asked thoughtful questions about pediatric care and the challenges of explaining complex diagnoses to worried parents, how they'd exchanged numbers to share resources about medical visualization techniques, and how, over the following weeks, those professional conversations had become personal, flirtatious, and eventually something more. The journal entries were detailed. Too detailed. She wrote about meeting him at the pool bar because it was far enough from the hospital that she wouldn't run into colleagues, far enough from our neighborhood that she wouldn't see anyone we knew. How they'd play pool for hours, talking about everything except their real lives, their dreams, their disappointments, the people they'd been before responsibility and obligation had shaped them into who they were now. She mentioned me once, and those words are burned into my memory. Jim is wonderful in so many ways, but he's married to his work as much as I am to mine. We've become roommates who share a bed. Hank makes me feel seen. I closed the laptop. My hands were trembling so badly, I had to clasp them together. Part of me wanted to scream, to break something, to drive to wherever she really was and confront her in front of her colleague and expose the lie. But another part, the designer part that thinks in terms of structure and strategy, that plans projects from foundation to finish, started calculating. Catherine was meeting Hank that very evening. According to her calendar, she had another workshop scheduled for 7 o'clock. It was almost 5 now. I had time to decide what to do with this information, how to handle what came next. I called my old college friend Kent, who still lived in Denver. We'd been roommates at CU Boulder, had stayed close even as our lives diverged. I need a favor, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And you can't ask questions. That serious? Kent's voice was concerned. He knew me well enough to know I didn't ask for help lightly. That serious? Kent met me at a coffee shop near his house 20 minutes later. I told him enough, that I suspected Catherine was cheating, that I needed to confirm it with my own eyes before deciding what to do. Kent, loyal friend that he'd been since our undergraduate days, agreed to go with me to the pool bar. You shouldn't do this alone, he said simply. We arrived at the Riverside Recreation Center at 7:30. The pool bar was exactly as I'd imagined from the photos. Dim lighting, a few pool tables scattered across a worn wooden floor, a bar along one wall with a tired-looking bartender, and a relaxed atmosphere of people escaping their daily lives. And there she was. Catherine, my wife of 10 years, in jeans and a casual top I'd never seen before, something soft and feminine that she never wore around me anymore. She was leaning over a pool table, lining up a shot, and a man was standing behind her, his body close to hers, ostensibly showing her proper form and technique. But it was all pretense. Their body language said everything. The way she laughed at something he whispered near her ear. The way his hand lingered on her waist after the shot. The way she looked up at him with an expression that was unmistakably intimate, familiar, comfortable. I felt Kent's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Jim, what do you want to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I could storm in there right now, make a scene, and everything publicly and dramatically. Flip over the pool table, punch this Hank in his smiling face, watch Catherine's expression crumble as her two worlds collided. But that wasn't who I was. And more importantly, I realized in that moment that I didn't want to end my marriage. Not yet. Not without understanding why this had happened and whether it could be fixed, whether the woman I'd married was still in there somewhere beneath the lies and betrayal. I took photos with my phone. Clinical, documentary evidence. Each click of the camera shutter felt like a nail in a coffin. Whether it was the coffin of our marriage or the coffin of this affair, I didn't yet know. Then Kent and I left, walking out into the cool Denver evening, the mountains visible in the distance, permanent and unchanging while my entire world shifted beneath my feet. The drive home was silent. Kent dropped me off with a tight hug and a promise to be available whenever I needed him, day or night. I sat in our apartment in the dark, in the chair by the window where I'd read so many Sunday mornings, and waited. Catherine came home at 10:30, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen in her in years. "Hey, honey," she said, kissing the top of my head as I sat on the couch, exactly as she'd done 1,000 times before. "Sorry I'm late." The research discussion with Sylvia ran long, and then she wanted to grab dinner. Sylvia, a colleague Catherine had mentioned before, a pediatric surgeon at the hospital. At least she was keeping her cover stories straight, layering in real people and plausible scenarios. "How was your evening?" she asked, heading to the kitchen for water, comfortable and casual, completely unaware that everything had changed. "Enlightening," I said. Something in my tone made her pause. She turned slowly, looking at me carefully in the dim light from the street lamps outside. "Everything okay?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat and hard in a way it had never been with her before. "But not tonight. Tomorrow. I need you to take the day off work." Her face went pale, the color draining so quickly I thought she might faint. "Jim." "Tomorrow, Catherine. We'll talk tomorrow." That night, I slept in our guest room for the first time in our marriage. I heard her crying through the wall around 2 a.m., soft and broken, but I didn't go to her. I needed this night to figure out what I wanted, what I was willing to fight for, and what I was willing to forgive. I lay awake until dawn, watching the sunrise through the unfamiliar window, and by morning, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I made coffee and waited. Catherine emerged from our bedroom, looking like she hadn't slept. She'd called in sick to work. I'd heard her making the call. "I know about Hank," I said simply. She sat down across from me at our small dining table, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "How long have you known?" "Does it matter? I know about the pool bar. I know about the workshop where you met. I know this has been going on for 4 months. Tears started rolling down her face. "Jim, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. But it did happen. You made choices, Catherine. Multiple choices over multiple months to betray our marriage. I know. There's no excuse." She was sobbing now. "It started as just talking. He was interested in my work, really interested, in a way that felt different. And then it became something more, and I didn't know how to stop it. Did you sleep with him?" She shook her head vehemently. "No. I swear to you, no. It was emotional, and it was wrong, but it never went that far. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. Your journal said you felt invisible in our marriage." Her head snapped up. "You read my journal?" "I read your medical notes, found your calendar, and yes, read your journal. You don't get to be indignant about privacy right now, Catherine." She slumped in her chair. "You're right. I'm sorry. It's just, Jim, when did we stop really talking? When did we become just two people living parallel lives? That doesn't justify what you did. I know it doesn't, but it's the truth. We're both so focused on our careers. You're at the studio until 8, 9 at night sometimes. I'm at the hospital doing rounds, then coming home to paperwork. When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time we went on a date?" She wasn't wrong. Our marriage had become efficient, practical. We were partners in running a household, but somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being partners in anything deeper. "So what do we do now?" Catherine asked quietly. "Do you want a divorce?" I'd thought about this all night. "No," I said finally. "I don't want a divorce. But I don't want this marriage either, this hollow thing we've been living in. Something has to change. Everything has to change. What do you want me to do?" "I'll do anything. First, you end it with Hank. Completely. Today. No final meetings, no closure conversations. You text him right now, in front of me, and tell him it's over." Catherine nodded and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She typed, "Hank, I can't continue this relationship. It was wrong, and I need to focus on my marriage. Please don't contact me again." She showed me the message before sending it. "Second," I continued, "we start couples therapy. Non-negotiable. We find someone this week and commit to going weekly." "Okay. Yes. I'll find someone today." Third, we both make changes. Real changes. I'll cut back my hours at the studio. You'll set boundaries at the hospital. We'll have dinner together at least 4 nights a week. We'll date each other again, like we did before we got married." Catherine was crying again, but nodding. "I want that. I want us back." "And fourth," I said, my voice harder now, "you have to understand that trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It's going to take time. A long time. And you don't get to be frustrated with me if I have questions or doubts or bad days. You did this. You broke this. And you're going to have to be patient while we fix it." "I understand," she whispered. "Jim, I love you. I know I didn't show it, and I know I hurt you, but I do love you. I don't want to lose you." I looked at my wife, really looked at her. I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 11 years ago at that charity auction. I also saw someone who'd made terrible choices and hurt me deeply. But I also saw someone who was genuinely remorseful, someone who wanted to fight for our marriage. "I love you too," I said. "That's why I'm willing to try. But Catherine, this is your only chance. If anything like this ever happens again, we're done. No discussion, no second chances. Done. It won't happen again. I promise you it won't." The weeks that followed were hard. Probably the hardest of our marriage. Catherine found us a therapist named Dr. Valentine, and we started sessions that were often painful and uncomfortable. We talked about things we'd avoided for years. Communication patterns, unmet needs, the slow drift that had happened while we were both so focused on our careers. Hank tried to contact Catherine twice. Once by text, which she immediately showed me, and blocked him. Once he showed up at the hospital, which she handled by having security escort him out and filing a formal complaint with his employer. After that, he disappeared from our lives. I had tough days. Days when I'd look at Catherine and feel a flash of anger, so intense I had to leave the room. Days when I questioned whether I was being a fool for trying to make this work. Kent met me for drinks one night and asked me point blank if I was sure about my decision. She cheated on you, Jim. Emotionally, physically, in terms of time and attention, she betrayed you. You don't have to stay. I know I don't have to, I told him. But I want to. Not because I'm afraid of being alone or because divorce is too complicated, but because when I look at what we had and what we could have again, I think it's worth fighting for. She made a terrible mistake, but our entire marriage wasn't a mistake. Tom at work noticed the change in me too. I was leaving the office at 6 every evening, something I hadn't done in years. "Everything all right, boss?" he asked one day. "Actually, yeah," I said. "Everything's getting better." And slowly it was. Catherine cut back her hours at the hospital, delegating some responsibilities and learning to say no to extra shifts. We started cooking dinner together, something we'd never really done even in our early marriage. We really talked about our days, our feelings, our fears. We went on dates. Real dates. We drove up to the mountains for hikes. We found a small jazz club in downtown Denver and made it our regular Friday night spot. We rediscovered why we'd fallen in love in the first place. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks. One night in June, Catherine came home late from the hospital because of a genuine emergency, and I felt all the old suspicions flood back. She saw it in my face and immediately showed me her phone, the logged calls, the texts from colleagues confirming the situation. She didn't get defensive. She understood. "This is going to take time," she said. "I know that. I'll be patient." By the end of summer, something had shifted. We weren't just rebuilding our marriage. We were building something new. Something stronger. We'd learned to communicate in ways we never had before. We'd learned to prioritize each other without losing ourselves. I'm not going to pretend it was easy or that there weren't scars. But sometimes things have to break before they can be properly fixed. Sometimes you have to face the worst possibilities before you can appreciate what you have. A year after that terrible Saturday when I found Catherine's journal, we were stronger than ever. We'd learned that marriage isn't something you achieve and then maintain on autopilot. It's something you have to actively choose and nurture every single day. Catherine and I chose each other. We chose our marriage. And that choice, made consciously and deliberately every day, made all the difference. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.